what what types of home remedies did you use?
Well, we had stuff called black salve and we had yellow salve. We would rub that for certain pains and whether or not you had got stung by a bee or anything else, you'd use that. If you had pain in the stomach, everybody knew what to use for if your stomach was paining. So we had certain illness that the whole community used to cure the pain or the illness. And not only did we have it, our neighbor would have it. So if the neighbor had some, we'd get some from the neighbor, and vice versa. Had a headache, there were certain things to use for headache. All kind of remedies we would use for different pains. So we really didn't have any problems with being ill. When the lady got pregnant, we didn't know, at an early age, we didn't know what that was. So when the doctor came with the black satchel, we were told that he was bringing the baby to us. And we just took that, we didn't know any better. So when he left, then they had what was known as a midwife. Then the midwife would take care of the mother, for a certain period of time until, the baby was able to cry and do all of these kind of things. And that's how we went on in the civil war sickness. We had very little, a few people had cars in order to go to the doctor. The doctor was probably 3 miles away, and you couldn't walk there if you're sick. You get a bumblebee, you know what to use for the bumblebee or the mosquito. So when I look back now, I felt that some of the remedies that they used then are better than what the doctors are using today. There's no such thing as operations.
Oh, yes. Tell me, do you remember what the black salve was used for and the yellow salve?
Yeah, black salve was used for sores more or less. And in our case, in order to catch crabs, we would wade in the water. And in the water there were shells. And sometimes we'd get our feet cut with the shells. So for the yellow salve, we would use that. Or if it was another kind of sore, we would use another color salve. Looking back, they all were the same thing, just different colors. Because we would gargle our throat with I forget what you used to call that. If we had sore throat, we'd use that to gargle our throat. And, eventually that got well. We'd stay out of the water.
Tell me about your teenage life and how was it growing up?
When you said teenage, what are you talking about? Teenage or teenage, unteenage?
Teenage, unteenage, just growing up.
Well, as Brooks had mentioned, Happy Land was one of the places that we used to go as teens, but we couldn't stay all night. We'd stay most of the evening, and usually Leroy or somebody had a ballpark out there that we used to play ball. And after that, we'd go to the place to dance. Dancing was very nice then. And we had some movies. Leroy used to have movies there for us. A lot of things that Leroy used to have that we used to go to for fun, natural fun, And it was not only that place. Families had picnics during the summer and that sort of thing. We'd go to them, and that's where we entertained ourselves. And then one group would play against the other, one family would play against the other in softball, baseball, pitching horseshoes, and that kind of thing. That's how we really entertained ourselves.
What about race relations back in those days? Do you remember?
Yeah, it depends on who you were. My mother was a very light-skinned person, and the whites respected her very highly. She used to work sometimes with the whites, or for the whites, on the island. And they treated her a little different from they treated my father. But since my father was married to her, they had to treat him almost the same way. And that's where the relationship became involved. For an example, most of the folks who were buying oysters were the whites, and they had these big boats. But my dad was able to sell oysters to those folks when the other blacks could not sell oysters too. It was because of my mother that he was able to do that. We had one hotel in Piney Point, and that used to close in the summer because the white man owned that. And he would give my father the keys to that hotel, and he would allow him the privilege of picking out people to work in the hotel, especially waiters, when the hotel opened in the summer. He would allow him to look at the garden food that was brought in to see if that was all right. And I guess when he went in the winter, my father would have the keys. So he got a lot of respect, and it meant a lot to us. It meant a lot to us having that kind of relationship. Of course, he would make a little more money than the other blacks who were working there. He gained a lot of respect for those people. He was allowed to go to the farm and look at the food that they were bringing to the hotel to determine whether or not he should buy it. And that put him in a different spot than a lot of the other black folks. And it was that way all the way up the line to include, he used to do some painting. He was in charge of painting houses and places of that nature. And he was able to use the white person in order to help him, but they would pay him so he could pay the white. So that's the way that I grew up. And of course, after school, we played with the white boys and girls. We played with them because it was right across the road from where we lived. And we didn't see any problems with that. We didn't get on the same buses. We had different buses to go to school. And things were different. Things were different. But I guess I picked that up at a certain age. And I tried my best to, force that. And I did in many ways. By saying, if you can do it, I can do it. And it made a difference in my life.
So how do you feel that things are any different today as far as race relations than they were?
Well, I listened to what Brooks said, but I don't agree with him. I feel that preparations mean so much. I believe that if you prepare yourself and able to articulate, what you're doing as opposed to what someone else is doing, then you can kind of get your way. I know you're not getting to employment as yet, but I worked for the Treasury Department for a while, and I was working with a white group, and I got to know more about the job than what they did, because I would come home and study. They didn't do that. Whatever they did was right on the job. But I got to be able to tell them what to do. I can remember a case whereby the two white supervisors were getting ready to hire somebody, and I was on the panel. They said, we know who we're going to hire. I said, you know who you're going to hire before the interview? They said, yeah, we know who they are. I said, no, you don't. So when we got in the room to interview the people, they had already picked out the people that they wanted, and they were white. So I said, no, look at her record as to the other one. I said, how can you afford to do that? How can you afford to do that? So they couldn't give me a reason. And as a result, my black ladies got the job. And they respected me. I'd come home at night and study. Well, these folks didn't do that. They didn't do it. They came home, got their pay, and came home, and that was it. But I'd stay up half the night studying, the work. And it really paid off. I'd tell them in a minute. I remember occasions when had a job vacant. I applied for the job. Was on the ticket to be interviewed for it. I went away on vacation. And when I got back, the supervisor had given it to this white lady. So I went in to see him. And he said, Erman, called me Erman, you can't do that. I said, I can't. I said, I know that I'm better qualified than what she is. He said, well, you were away. I said, I know that. So I went to the EEO at that time. That's what they called them. I went to the EEO. He said, no, we got an EEO here in the building. I said, no, you don't. I said, you don't have one for me. So I took time off and went to the main building, main treasury. And I knew a person over there was EEO and told him about it. So he said, is that right? I said, yeah. So then he called supervisor. So what's going on down there? Supervisor said, well, Erman was on vacation. He said, yeah, I know. She said, yeah, I know. But he was more qualified than who you put in the job. To make a long story short, I got the job. I got the job. And just the main of, pressing what you know is right and being qualified for that. So he stopped speaking, but I didn't care about that. I didn't care for that at all. So I think I took that after my dad, because he wouldn't let anybody, white or black, tell him what to do if he knew what he was doing. And it pays off today. It really does pay off today. It pays off today.
So you shared a little bit of your work life. I want to elaborate on that a little bit, but then before we go to that, I'd like to talk a little bit about life in St. Maurice County. How, when you were growing up, how did your family get to the news? How did you know what was going on in the world? That type of thing. Do you remember?
Well, we had a paper called, don't remember the name of it, but we got that once a month. Once a month. You know the name of it? Can't remember the name of it. We got it once a month.
Beacon. Beacon.
Yeah, okay. And it was about 25 cents a month. And my dad wanted to pay it, so he sacrificed to get that paper, wherein other folks couldn't see that made sense. But I took that after him, and I used that. Then we talked to people who was in the know, like your dad, for an example. Talked to him. And we found out about things and pursued it. And I think you can do the same thing today. If you're persistent in what's right and know that you're qualified for that and can talk just the way that they talk, and I think it works. But if you assume that you can't get the job because you're black, that's where you're going to always stay.
You mentioned walking to school and living in your area. What about religion, and how did that play a part? And was there a church that you attended growing up?
Yeah, we had one Methodist church that we all went to school. Well, we had some Catholics there too, but most of us were Methodists. My father didn't go to church that much, but my mother went to church, about every Sunday, and she dragged us to church. Then they had church for kids.
Oh, okay.
That was never done like it should be, because our teachers were not that great in church, but we did learn something. Not enough. Sunday school was not that great. I got to admit that Sunday school was not that good, but it was there. I remember when we were playing baseball, with a Methodist minister, Baptist minister, and we used to go. The church was at 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. Baseball started at 1 o'clock, and as a result, all the people went to the baseball game rather than going to church. So I went to the minister. I said, sir, I think you'd have more people come to church if you change the time. If you change the time to about 11. He said, oh no, I can't do that. I can't do that. I said, well, you're gonna be sitting here by yourself. I said that time, Reverend Hooper was his name. I said, you're gonna be sitting here by yourself. So he watched it for one Sunday, and so enough, he did have people there by himself. So then he called me and he says, we're gonna change the time. I said, good. So at the baseball time, it was about, I guess, 60 yards from the church. The church people were loaded, fathers, mothers, sisters, brother, all of them wanted to see us play ball and didn't go to church. So he said, I know I'm not doing right, but I'm gonna change the time to what you said. So he changed the time, and I told the folks about that. So at 11 o'clock, most of the people went to church, but then they came over to watch us play ball. so that worked, especially in the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
And in the wintertime, we're trying to make our way up there. It worked.
It sounds like, you enjoy church and you enjoy the family relations with the church and that type of thing. And so tell me more about your work life later on in years, and tell me about what you did in life and your progress in your military experiences.
Okay. As I said before, when I went in the military, I didn't know what foot to start off with. My mother lady fell across the street from me, as I told you, Civil War. He wouldn't tell us anything about the military. I knew he knew because he was in the military. I was drafted at Fort Meade. I stayed at Fort Meade about a week or so. Then I went off to Fort Custer, Michigan. And at Fort Custer, Michigan, most of the guys that were in Fort Custer, Michigan had some training in military, like my good friend here. I had none. They were coming from universities, not university, but coming less than university training. All of them had military training. So we had privilege to go on pass, but we had to know a certain amount of stuff, military, before we could go on pass. So I went on pass one day. I went to the company clerk. The CQ was not CQ, but the captain who was there, who would answer questions. He said, I want you to start with the president and come on down to a private. So I said, you do? I said, I can't answer that. So he said, you go back and study. So I went back to study, and I thought they were going to ask the same question. They asked me a different question, and I didn't know that. I said, sir, I don't want to go on pass. So I went on back to the barracks and pulled out the books, and I started studying. So to make a long story short, after a while, I knew more than what this guy did who come out of school, because all they want to do is go to town and have a good time. So then I got promoted to PFC, and I got promoted to a corporal. And I went overseas, I was a corporal, but I was in better shape than they were because I was studying and I knew more than what they did. So that was the beginning of my career in the military. So I didn't stop that on when we got to a permanent place like France. I did the same thing. So when we went overseas, we had to have white officers. When we were in the States, we had black officers. But when we went overseas, they took all the blacks that we had because they could not go overseas as an officer being black. So then I continued to study. So they promoted me to a corporal. And that meant that I was over there. I was over there, and I performed like a corporal. So then we went to Normandy, France went to Ireland first for 6 months, I think. Then I hit Normandy, France on D+2 on the ship. I have a copy of the ship here now. And I continued to study, and they continued to play. So I became a sergeant. So I was a big guy there. I was a big guy as a sergeant. So when I came out of the military, I was a staff sergeant. And I got at Fort Monmouth, not Fort Monmouth. Fort Meade. They wanted me to train for a lieutenant, second lieutenant. So I said no. But then after I got home at Piney Point and saw what the conditions were, they were much different when I left. Then I wish I had stayed. But then I didn't stay. For military, I came to D.C. and got in the National Guard. And I was in the National Guard doing when they had riots here in D.C. I was promoted then to staff sergeant. And then for staff sergeant, I had quite a few people under me. And then from then on, I started training those sergeants, and I became a first sergeant. And then from then on, I moved up to a command sergeant major, which was the highest one of the two highest command sergeant majors in the nation. There was only two black sergeants, one from New Jersey and myself. So our meetings we'd go to, he and I would stand out, but we never associated with each other. We associated with the white command sergeant majors, white sergeant majors, and some of them didn't know as much as I did. So when I retired, that's what I retired as, the command sergeant major of D.C. National Guard. When they had the riots here in D.C., I was the command sergeant major. And I had a company, about 80 men to perform duty in the Washington area. And I had a time getting those guys to stay at the Guard to do the function that you have to do in service. At a time, because I had our first lieutenant, I had to tell him what to do. But that paid off. That paid off. And I was happy that I did, because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working for the general, The general came to me one day, and my stuff wasn't ready. You have to get everything ready for inspection. So he said, I had several folks that were not qualified. So he said, Sergeant Major, why aren't these people qualified? I said, sir, they're not qualified. It's because they went to the range and they didn't qualify. And I said, I'm not going to pencil qualify anyone. I said, when I lay down beside a guy in the rock, so he's going to be qualified. So he turned around and went on back upstairs. So then he started, favoring me. You know that, right? So that was my stunt in the military. I retired after I got old enough to retire. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
For me and
I enjoyed it so much.
Now, after you got out of the military, what was your work like? And
well, I was in the Guard. I was working for Treasury Department at the same time. I was working for the Treasury Department. I got to be a GS-13. We were working in the check department, and I had 40 civilians who answered to me. And they got to love me because, I'd make them do what they need to do rather than eat lunch all day. and they love me. At the same time, I joined quite a few organizations in the area, like the NAACP and all of those type organizations. And I was president of this organization for 20 years, and I treated them like I did the military folks. Every month we had an executive meeting, and that executive meeting would be here in my house. And one was missing, I'd call them the next morning. But for the next meeting, they would be here. But after I stopped doing that, and the other president took over, he didn't know to do that. So they didn't make executive meeting. But what we discussed and decided in the executive meeting, when we went to the regular meeting, that's what we discussed. And I knew I had them because I had most of the folks in the executive meeting who had signed off on that. And that worked, but you can't get folks to do that anymore.
Yeah, sounds like you've been quite involved.
I have. Let me read off something. Excuse me. I just took this because I couldn't remember. I was a president of the Eastern Garden Service Association, president of Far Northeast South East Council, president of Far East Council Kiwanis Club, president of the District Columbia Enlisted Association, president of the District Farmers Market, vice chair of the District of Columbia Housing Association, revocation of the permit renewal, Veterans Renewal Board, and Promotion Board of Federal Workers. So I've been pretty active in it, and I enjoy it. I enjoy teaching, getting people to understand what they need to do. They got it. Most of us have it, but we just don't try to stick with it.
So in later years, you got married and had a family?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got married in 1951. My wife was a teacher, and she no longer wanted to teach, so I got her a position in the Treasury Department, not in my outfit, but making contact, and she enjoyed that, and she retired before she passed. I was involved in a lot of things because I can't stay busy. I had to be involved. I was involved with the area that I like to tell this. I was check liens and checks. There were some people from another country who had taken out checks that we used to get, and signed them, and they could put the amount in there that you wouldn't believe. Can't remember what country. So I was elected to go to Georgia where they were having a trial. And I looked around, I was the only black in the court. And the what's name said, "How do you know there's a signature?" So I said, "Sir, I've had training in signature identification." So he shut up, didn't say anymore. But we convicted people who had been doing that. I mean, thousands of dollars. They'd take out a check and erase what's on there, and you wouldn't think it was done. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed telling him off. I said, I know what I'm talking about. And I went, oh, see how this L is? See how this L is? I said, that's not like it should be. Yeah. But I've been in situations like that where I was the only black. Yeah. But never got scared. Never got scared.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Can't think of anything else.
You didn't tell us. Did you tell us how you met your wife?
I met my wife at the Veterans Administration. She was working at Veterans, and I met her there. Veterans Administration. I've been to several schools, DC Teachers College, a little bit of Howard. I've been to several of those schools. Didn't do as well as I expected. Went to engineering school. I thought I liked engineering, but I hated it. After I got into that. And I've been on quite a few boards here in DC.
Right.
I help people to get homes and stuff like that. Like, by being on the Housing and Finance Agency. You may have read about this some time ago, where my executive gave some money to someone who's running for mayor, and they caught up on her. So one day I came home, and my wife said, there's some people who want to see you. These were the, they call them, folks who involved with Hillary now, who's
FBI.
FBI. They were sitting at this table, two of them. So I walked in, and they said, "You, Mr. Clay?" I said, "Yes." "Well, we didn't come here to see whether or not you've done anything wrong, because you haven't." So they spent about an hour and a half here reviewing me if I knew anything about the money. The checks had been given to a person who was running for a council member. Now, she was running for mayor. So they spent about 2 hours, and they concluded that I was not involved. As a result of that, not as a result of that, but I got appointed as the chair of the Housing and Finance Agency. And there was one lady who saw that in the paper and didn't know that I had that position. She was from home, married, had a child. Not my child. She said, "I didn't know that you were in that position. We need a home. We want you to help us." But she never came back. She died about, I guess, 2 months ago. Evelyn's daughter. Was it Evelyn's daughter? Somebody's daughter. But she never came back. Her husband couldn't hear well. Can't think of his name now. Sharon, yeah. Yeah, she's the type, that was the type of position that I held in the Housing and Finance Agency. And I helped a lot of people who wanted to get ahead. Feel very proud.
Good. So did your life turn out the way you planned for it to? Do you feel?